Welcome back to my channel Celebuzz. Please share and subscribe and press the bell icon for new updates. The golden lights of Hollywood dimmed a little on the day the world lost Joe Don Baker, a titan of the screen who brought grit, charisma, and authenticity to every role he played. Known for his unflinching portrayals of tough, no-nonsense characters, Baker wasn't just a part of cinematic history, he helped shape it. His passing at the age of 89 marked the end of an era, and the ripple effect of his departure was felt deeply across the entertainment world. Joe Don Baker was a rare breed in Hollywood, an actor whose presence alone could command a scene without uttering a word. His chiseled features, steely eyes, and deep southern voice were instantly recognizable, but it was his ability to convey raw emotion behind those tough exteriors that truly made him a legend. Fans remember him most vividly for his breakout role in Walking Tall, a gritty tale of justice based on the real-life Sheriff Buford Pusser. But that film was just the tip of the iceberg in a career that spanned over 5 decades. When news of his death broke, tributes began pouring in from every corner of the industry. Celebrities, co-stars, directors, and fans took to social media to mourn his loss and celebrate his legacy. Pierce Brosnan, who shared the screen with Baker in GoldenEye and Tomorrow Never Dies, posted a heartfelt message on Instagram. Joe Don Baker was more than a co-star. He was a giant, a mentor, and a friend. He brought authenticity and danger to every scene. Rest in peace, old friend. Other James Bond alumni also chimed in. Daniel Craig referred to him as one of the real ones, while Judi Dench, in a rare public statement, praised his commanding presence and gentlemanly grace. Director Martin Campbell, who helmed GoldenEye, called him irreplaceable and credited him with helping to ground the film's tone with a sense of realism. Even Quentin Tarantino, known for his encyclopedic knowledge of classic cinema, spoke out during a podcast interview. Joe Don Baker is one of those actors who didn't need the spotlight because he was the spotlight. He made every scene crackle. Guys like him don't come around anymore. Beyond the accolades, it was the fans who reminded the world why Baker was so beloved. Social media was flooded with clips, interviews, and stills from his iconic roles. One particular video went viral, his final known interview, recorded a year before his passing. In it, Baker sat in a rocking chair on his Texas ranch, speaking humbly about his journey in the film industry. "I was never the most handsome, never the smoothest," he said with a smile. "But I gave it my all. I acted with my heart." The interview struck a chord with viewers, especially the moment where he paused and reflected. "At the end of the day, I just hope people remember me as someone who told the truth on screen. That's all any actor can ask for." Those words, now etched into the hearts of his admirers, have been widely shared as a tribute to his authenticity and humility. Hollywood may be an industry obsessed with youth and glamour, but Joe Don Baker represented a different kind of star. The kind forged in grit, perseverance, and a love for storytelling. He was not a product of manufactured fame, but of raw talent and hard-earned respect. His performances resonated because they came from a place of truth. Whether he was portraying a small-town sheriff taking on corruption in Walking Tall, a calculating villain in The Living Daylights, or a gruff CIA agent in GoldenEye, Baker never phoned it in. He lived those characters. His colleagues often spoke about his dedication to the craft. Sally Field, who worked with him early in their careers, recalled how Baker would memorize not only his lines, but also everyone else's on set. "He wanted to be prepared, not just for himself, but for the entire crew," she said. "He believed in teamwork. He believed in cinema." There's a story often told by crew members on the set of Walking Tall. During a particularly grueling shoot in the Tennessee heat, Baker reportedly insisted on doing his own stunts, many of which involved real physical risk. When asked why he wouldn't let a double takeover, he replied, "If the audience believes I'm doing it, they'll believe in the story. That's what matters." That dedication wasn't just impressive, it was inspiring. And it wasn't limited to the big screen. Baker was also known for being kind and approachable off camera. He never let fame go to his head. He'd often be found chatting with crew members, learning their names, sharing meals, and offering encouragement. To many, he was a mentor. To some, a father figure. To all, a true professional. In recent years, Baker had largely retreated from the public eye, choosing to live quietly on his Texas ranch. Yet even in retirement, he remained a powerful symbol of a bygone era of filmmaking, one that valued character over CGI, grit over glamour. His fans would frequently send letters hoping for a reply or an autograph, and Baker, ever the gentleman, often obliged. He reportedly kept a drawer full of handwritten notes from fans, calling them his trophies. Now, in the wake of his passing, fans have begun sharing those letters online, revealing the deep connection he maintained with his audience. One such letter from a now successful director read, "Dear Mr. Baker, watching Walking Tall as a kid taught me what it means to stand up for what's right. Thank you for showing us strength can be quiet, and justice can wear a cowboy hat." The train, Hollywood Walk of Fame has already begun preparations for a candlelight vigil in Baker's honor. Flowers, candles, and heartfelt notes now line his star on Hollywood Boulevard. Across the country, old films are being screened in his memory. AMC has announced a weekend-long marathon of his most iconic roles, and Netflix has seen a surge in streams of his James Bond appearances. But perhaps the most moving tribute came from a fan named Erica S., who tweeted a simple message that captured the essence of Joe Don Baker's impact. Joe Don Baker didn't just act, he made us believe, he made us feel. That's more than acting. That's art. As Hollywood continues to evolve, the legacy of Joe Don Baker will stand tall, a testament to what it means to be fearless, authentic, and utterly unforgettable. The stage may be dimmer without him, but his light, his characters, and his impact will continue to inspire generations of actors and moviegoers alike. In the glitzy, action-packed world of James Bond, there have been suave spies, deadly femme fatales, and sinister villains. But few supporting characters have ever stood out the way Joe Don Baker did. While he may never have worn the tuxedo or sipped the martinis as Bond himself, Baker carved out a unique and unforgettable legacy in the 007 universe that left fans worldwide in awe. His dual roles, first as a formidable villain and later as a trusted ally, made him one of the few actors to ever play both sides of the Bond narrative. That legacy now echoes louder than ever in the wake of his passing. To understand the depth of Joe Don Baker's contribution to the Bond saga, you have to look beyond the explosions and chase scenes. Baker brought something rarely seen in the world of espionage cinema: grounded realism. In a franchise known for over-the-top gadgets and larger-than-life characters, Baker's presence always felt startlingly human. He wasn't there to dazzle with tech or outwit the enemy with a smirk. He was there to deliver results and add gravitas. Baker first appeared in the Bond franchise in 1987's The Living Daylights, playing the menacing arms dealer Brad Whitaker. The character was brash, flamboyant, and ruthless, a corrupt American general who fancied himself a military genius. It was a bold choice to cast Baker as the villain, especially since he had already built a career playing lawmen and tough good guys, but he leaned into the role with full force, creating a memorable antagonist that was equal parts terrifying and oddly charismatic. What made Whitaker such a chilling villain wasn't just his power. It was his belief in his own delusion. Baker portrayed Whitaker as a man so consumed by war fantasies that he surrounded himself with statues of historical generals, fancying himself as their modern successor. He was a villain grounded in psychological complexity, and Baker brought that character to life in a way few others could. Fans may remember Bond's final confrontation with Whitaker in a room full of military memorabilia, where he finally brought the general down in a spectacular climax. It was Baker at his boldest, commanding, dangerous, unforgettable. And then, in a rare move that surprised even hardcore Bond fans, Baker returned to the franchise nearly a decade later. But this time, he wasn't the villain. He was an ally. In GoldenEye 1995, the world met Jack Wade, a gruff, wisecracking CIA agent who seemed more at home in a pickup truck than a tuxedo. Wade was the American answer to Bond's British refinement, a no-nonsense, straight-talking agent who got things done without ceremony. Baker's performance in the role was an instant hit. He injected humor, relatability, and a touch of blue-collar realism into the otherwise slick world of international espionage. The chemistry between Wade and Pierce Brosnan's Bond was magnetic. While Bond oozed polish and precision, Wade brought in the muscle and mischief. One memorable scene shows Wade in a Hawaiian shirt, driving a beat-up car, greeting Bond with, "Come on, Jimmy, let's roll." It was a line delivered with casual charm, and it stuck with audiences. This wasn't just comic relief. This was a full-fledged partnership. Wade reappeared in Tomorrow Never Dies, 1997, further cementing Baker's status as a fan favorite. In a franchise that often cycled through disposable side characters, bringing back Baker's Wade was a clear indication of how beloved and effective he had become. His second outing gave him even more space to shine, offering comic timing, loyalty, and a certain brotherly rapport with Bond that audiences found refreshing. What made Baker's presence in the Bond universe so unique wasn't just the rare feat of playing both a villain and a hero, it was the emotional balance he brought to both. As Whitaker, he was cold and dangerous. As Wade, he was warm and dependable. Both roles required entirely different energies, yet Baker transitioned between them effortlessly. It's a testament to his acting range and his ability to reinvent himself, even within the same universe. But what many fans don't know is that Joe Don Baker was once considered for a much bigger role in the Bond world. In the early 1980s, during the uncertain period following Roger Moore's tenure, Baker's name was floated in closed-door casting sessions as a potential Bond. It may seem surprising given his rugged American persona, but insiders claim that producers admired his screen presence and wanted to bring a different kind of energy to the franchise. Ultimately, the idea was shelved in favor of keeping the role distinctly British, but it leaves fans wondering what could have been. Imagine a Bond played by Joe Don Baker, grittier, bolder, less polished, but more dangerous. He wouldn't have sipped martinis with a pinky up. He'd have knocked back bourbon and gotten straight to business. It's a fascinating what-if scenario that still pops up on Bond fan forums to this day. Even outside the Bond universe, Baker's roles often echoed the same duality, heroism with an edge, villainy with a hint of charm. But in Bond films, that duality was brought to the forefront. It's why his legacy in the franchise remains so unique. Other actors played one role and faded. Baker played two, and both are still etched in fan memory decades later. Since his passing, Bond fan pages and YouTube channels have exploded with tribute videos, compilation clips of Jack Wade's funniest moments, deep dives into Brad Whitaker's psychological profile, and even AI-generated "What If Baker Was Bond" videos are racking up millions of views. One viral video, simply titled "The Two Faces of Joe Don Baker in 07, explores the transformation from villain to ally with a poignant soundtrack and commentary. Fans in the comments section share how Baker's characters help define their Bond experiences. One user wrote, "Joe, Don Baker was never the main guy in Bond, but he was always the one I looked forward to seeing. He brought heart, soul, and a little southern swagger to a world that sometimes took itself too seriously." Another posted, "The fact that he played both a villain and a hero just shows how damn good he was. R.I.P. to a real legend." Even the official James Bond Twitter account posted a black and white photo of Baker with the caption, "From foe to friend, Joe Don Baker brought strength and depth to every frame. Thank you for being part of our story." His death has prompted calls for a more permanent tribute within the Bond universe. Fans are petitioning for the next Bond film to include a subtle nod to Baker's legacy, perhaps a photo of Jack Wade on M's desk, or a scene where Bond reminisces about his American ally. Some are even suggesting naming a fictional CIA office or base after Wade in the Bond universe as a quiet homage. There's no question. Joe Don Baker wasn't just a guest star in the Bond saga, he was part of its DNA. He represented the strength behind the shadows, the power of character over costume. And in a franchise built on evolution and reinvention, Baker proved that the best stories come from the most unexpected corners. As we look back on the impact he had, it becomes clear that Baker's Bond legacy is not just about the roles he played, but about the mark he left on one of cinema's most iconic franchises. He reminded audiences that allies don't have to be perfect, villains don't have to be cartoonish, and sometimes the real strength lies in presence, not gadgets. In the ever-expanding world of James Bond, where actors come and go and styles evolve, Joe Don Baker remains a constant. His characters were real, layered, and utterly compelling. He may have walked off the set for the last time, but in the hearts of Bond fans everywhere, Jack Wade and Brad Whitaker will forever be walking tall. In the vast cinematic landscape of America, very few actors manage to bring the raw, unfiltered essence of their hometowns to the silver screen quite like Joe Don Baker. While the glitz and glamour of Hollywood may have shaped his career, it was the wide, sun-scorched plains of Texas that shaped the man. And as the world bids farewell to this screen icon, it's his southern roots, his earthy charm, unwavering integrity, and unpretentious strength that fans and colleagues remember most fondly. Born in Groesbeck, a small Texas town that most maps barely mark, Joe Don Baker was never supposed to be a Hollywood star. There were no red carpets, no agents, and no film schools in his early years. What there was, though, was a deep respect for storytelling. Long before he ever stepped onto a film set, Baker was raised on stories told under open skies. Tales of cowboys, lawmen, and underdogs. These tales became the foundation of his soul, and later, the driving force behind his most iconic roles. Joe Don wasn't a product of stage academies or acting dynasties. He attended the University of North Texas and later studied acting at the Actors Studio in New York, where legends like Marlon Brando and Paul Newman had once honed their craft. But even as he stood among aspiring actors in bustling New York theaters, Baker carried Texas in his voice, his posture, and his values. He was a man of few words and strong beliefs, an outsider among showbiz elites, yet someone who commanded respect simply by being genuine. His earliest roles in film and television were modest. He played soldiers, deputies, and rough-edged men in westerns and crime dramas. But there was something magnetic about him, something that made audiences look twice. That something exploded onto the big screen with the 1973 classic Walking Tall. Portraying Buford Pusser, a real-life sheriff who waged a one-man war against crime and corruption in Tennessee, Baker delivered a performance that was nothing short of legendary. The film was low budget and had little studio backing, but Baker's portrayal was so raw and visceral that it captured America's imagination. He didn't just act, he became Pusser. With every swing of his iconic wooden club, Baker personified justice, grit, and unbreakable spirit. Audiences weren't just watching a film, they were watching a movement. Walking Tall wasn't just entertainment, it was a cinematic rebellion against the decay of moral order. Joe Don Baker's sheriff didn't rely on flashy techniques or clever dialogue. His justice was physical, primal, and deeply emotional. The film struck a nerve in a country grappling with political distrust and rising crime, and Baker became a folk hero almost overnight. Critics praised his relentless intensity, while fans across the South saw in him a man who stood up for what was right, no matter the cost. Many called it a career-defining performance. Baker, however, remained humble. In interviews, he often deflected praise, saying, "I just told a story. Buford was the real hero. I just tried not to mess it up." But the story of Joe Don Baker didn't end with Walking Tall. In fact, it was only the beginning of a storied career that would span 5 decades. He went on to star in films like Charlie Varick, Mitchell, and Edge of Darkness, each time bringing a new layer of depth to the archetype he had mastered. The tough, principled man who didn't need to shout to be heard. Directors loved him for his honesty on screen. John Flynn, who directed Rolling Thunder, once said, "Joe Don doesn't act like the character, he is the character. You don't direct him, you just unleash him." That kind of praise followed him throughout his career, but it never changed. The man himself. He never forgot where he came from. Despite his fame, Baker stayed deeply connected to Texas. He built a ranch outside of Austin and spent most of his free time there. Locals would often see him at diners, hardware stores, or walking along dusty trails in boots that had seen years of wear. He never had an entourage. He never sought attention. If you walked up and greeted him, he'd smile, shake your hand, and talk to you like an old friend. "He never acted like a movie star," said Donna Fields, a resident of Austin who once served him at a small cafe. "He treated everyone like equals. He asked about my family, left a big tip, and told me to stay true. I'll never forget that." Those kinds of stories have poured out since the announcement of his death. Across Texas, people are sharing their memories, small encounters, and heartfelt messages. A mural in Groesbeck was spontaneously painted by local artists, showing Baker in his sheriff uniform standing tall with the words, "Justice has a face." The town has announced plans for a permanent memorial and declared a Joe Don Baker Day to honor their native son. Baker's Southern identity wasn't just a footnote in his biography, it was woven into every role he played. He carried the cadence of the South in his voice and the values of the South in his choices. He often spoke about his upbringing in interviews, saying things like, "You don't have to be rich to be proud. You don't have to be loud to be strong. That's what I learned back home, and I tried to carry it into every part I played." That philosophy resonated deeply in an industry that often prioritizes spectacle over substance. Baker never relied on gimmicks. His performances weren't polished to perfection, they were real. And in being real, he touched something in audiences that many modern actors can't reach. As time went on and roles became scarcer for older actors, Baker stepped back from the limelight, but he never stopped being a storyteller. In his final years, he mentored young actors, wrote unpublished memoirs, and spent countless hours simply watching classic films that reminded him of why he fell in love with the craft in the first place. One particularly touching detail that surfaced after his passing came from a close friend, who revealed that Baker had kept a notebook of roles I wish I'd played. Inside were scribbled titles and characters, some famous, some obscure, but each marked with thoughts and emotional notes. One entry read, Atticus Finch, because truth, even in silence, is louder than noise. It's a haunting insight into the mind of a man who never stopped pushing himself, even when the cameras stopped rolling. To many, Joe Don Baker was more than an actor. He was a symbol, a reminder that strength doesn't have to roar, and honor doesn't need applause. Hollywood has lost many icons over the years, but the loss of Baker feels personal. It feels like losing a family member who always stood firm, always told the truth, and always had your back. His films remain, of course, immortal and accessible, but it's the man behind those roles who will be missed most dearly. As tributes continue to flood in, one message from a young actor on Instagram stands out. You showed me that I didn't need to change where I'm from to make it in this business. I just needed to bring it with me. Thank you, Joe Don. And maybe that's the most powerful legacy of all. In a world constantly demanding transformation, Joe Don Baker stayed true. He walked tall, not just on screen, but in life. Unshaken, unyielding, and unforgettable. Rest easy, legend. Your boots may be empty now, but your footsteps echo on.